living fully alive in every way. You're listening to Relationship Prescriptions with Dr. Carol.
Hello again, friends. It's Dr. Carol, and welcome to Relationship Prescriptions. Thanks for being part of our podcast family. Think back, if you would, to the last time you talked with one of your parents, mother, father, however long ago that was. Maybe it was just earlier today. Maybe it's been weeks, months, or even years ago. Think back to that last contact that you had with your parents, and then ask yourself, how old did you feel in that moment? Did you feel like an adult, or did you still feel like a child? You know, we all have parents, all of us, every single one of us. And the relationship with our parents is, for most of us, a little mixed. Sometimes there is a lot more trauma than others. Sometimes there's a lot of nurturing and joy and growth in that ongoing relationship. Other times there's a lot of disconnection. Maybe you grew up with parents that were even toxic. Maybe they paid no attention to your needs when you were a child. Maybe there was an abusive relationship in your home. Addiction, mental illness, the realities of how you grew up impact how you now relate to the world and to your parents as an adult. Over the last few days, I've had some conversations that has brought this reality back to me again. Just yesterday, I was talking with a friend who, in reflecting on her experience with your parents, said, I need a mom. She was telling some very sad stories about, in all her growing up years, there was never a sense that her mother understood her. At her school events or sporting events, her mother would never show up. She had older and younger siblings, and she had the sense that her mother was always interested and involved in their lives, but never in hers. In a recent tragic ending of her marriage, it was a couple years before her mother even became aware. And it wasn't because she and my friend weren't communicating at all. Her mother just never asked. And there was never an opportunity to share even some of the current difficult circumstances that she was in. I have another friend who's been communicating by email about his relationship with his parents. He is now in his 40s, and he always feels like his parents treat him as a child. Every time he's around them, he feels manipulated, controlled, often shamed and belittled, like he doesn't understand even the basics about how to carry himself in the world. That is a reality for many adults. And just earlier this morning, I had a friend email me and ask, how do I have an adult relationship with my parents as a single person? I'm unmarried, I'm an adult, but my parents don't see me that way. You know, how do you relate to your parents if they're difficult, dealing with difficult parents? And I want to give you some practical tools, some ways to think about that part of what can be challenging for many of us. Again, I pray that your relationship with your parents has been and is wonderful. But in whatever aspect of that relationship is difficult, let's talk about that. And I want to share some very practical realities with you. For many who grow up wrestling with difficult parents, there are some scriptures that can add to the emotional difficulty there. Of course, there is the commandment, honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that your Lord your God is giving you. That commandment from God has often been carried as a shameful weight by people who have a difficult relationship with their parents. There are the New Testament messages. Jesus said, when talking in the Sermon on the Mount, my paraphrase, that you leaders, Christian leaders, uh, say that you uh, if you as a follower of God devote all your goods to the church, then you don't have to take care of your parents. And Jesus said that was very wrong and was dishonoring to God and his commandments. There is the scripture that Paul wrote to Timothy, 1 Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Pretty heavy stuff if you have difficult parents. If they did not provide for your needs then or are treating you as a child now, um, neglectful, abusive, whatever. So, how do we deal with those difficult circumstances with parents in a God honoring way? Often it can feel like an all or nothing. Either I write my parents off and have nothing more to do with them and risk, guilt and God's displeasure, or I give in to what my parents are wanting or demanding or accept bad behavior from them. There are other alternatives. You don't have to live with that kind of shame and guilt. You can deal with your difficult parents and in a healthy way and still honor God. A couple things that may help put this in perspective. Uh, your parents know how to push your buttons because they installed them. They do not wake up in the morning, and if they do, it's incredibly rare. Even the most difficult parent does not wake up in the morning thinking, I wonder how I can make my child's life miserable today. Your parents almost certainly are not approaching their relationship with you from malice. Now, yes, there are toxic people who have children, and it is possible that your parent is one of those toxic, destructive people. Um, if so, God has a good future for you anyway. But the majority of the time, your parents are difficult, even though they are not outright setting out planning to destroy your life. Remember that. It's almost always true that hurting people hurt people. Your parents came into their lives with stuff from their parents before them and before them and before them. I heard just this weekend a man talk about how he had never had a, a reasonable conversation with his father. He remembers being 13 years old and trying. He was not living with his father at the time, and he went back to visit his father and tried to have a conversation with his father. And his father responded with 2 or 3 words. Oh, okay. No engagement. And this man, now a senior adult, was heartbroken, of course, by that event. But eventually he realized something about his father that he didn't know as a child. His father's father, his grandfather, had been deaf. And so his father had never in his whole life been able to have a conversation with his father. So he never saw it modeled and therefore was unable to give that to his son. Now, that's one perhaps of the more obvious circumstances, but your parents came with baggage and wounds, and therefore they did not have everything that you needed as a child. That is a reality for every single one of us in this world. There is no human being that gets everything from their parents that they need. Now, some get more than others. Absolutely, that is true. But remember that you are not alone if you have a difficult relationship with your parents. Even the very best parents fall short. And so, how do you, as now an adult, able to make choices, deal with that? The perhaps foundational principle that can help you in working through some of these issues is owning the transition to adulthood in your own head. You are an adult in your head if you choose to be. Now, that may sound simple, but it really isn't. Many who grew up in a difficult childhood got stuck somewhere along the way. Family of origin issues are a big deal. Regardless of how good your family looked on the outside, there were difficulties. In the healthiest families, the parents welcome when their children grow up, go through their teen years and young adulthood. And although there may be some pulling and pushing, they welcome their child's development and growth. In a less healthy family, that does not happen. Uh, the behaviors that you learned as a child, simply as a matter of survival, can stay with you. And remember that it's not so much your physical earthly parents that determine your emotional health as an adult. It's the parents in your head. It's the messages that you're not good enough that the mother or father in your head is telling you. It's the neglect of the parent in your head that continue to wound you. That is a much bigger deal. And for the majority of adults, doing some work in your family of origin can diffuse a lot of that shame and heaviness and help you get over some real roadblocks to growing up. Family of origin work that some call a genogram, looking at your parents, your grandparents, what you know about where they came from, looking at not only just what part of the world they were and who was born when, but characteristics, family issues that you got burdened with as a child without knowing it, without deciding it before you knew enough that you were being influenced. You got saddled with this baggage, some good and healthy, and some almost certainly painful or destructive or maladaptive. Looking at that family of origin history can help you with grace for both yourself and your parents. So, I want to talk with you about 5 things that you can do to deal with your difficult parents in a healthy way. This can apply whether you're close or distant from your parents. These can also, in most instances, apply even if the difficult parent you're still having to deal with is in your head and your physical earthly parents are no longer on this earth. They have passed away. So here are some healthy ways to deal with difficult parents. Number 1, look for the gratitude. Be grateful for what you can be grateful for. You have a lot of choice in the matter. Some of you will find this easier than others. For some, it will be very difficult. For example, in my case, there was a lot of difficulty growing up, a lot of dysfunction in my family, but there are a number of things that I can look back on with true gratitude. 2 of them come to mind right now. One is I am grateful that I learned about the Bible, that I learned to study the Bible, that I learned biblical truths, that I was taught both the stories and the truths about the Bible, but also how to apply it to my life. That was a part of my growing up, just from the time I was a baby. Learning the Bible and applying it was a part of my life. And I am so incredibly grateful for that. There are many pitfalls that I avoided in life because of that, because God's word was implanted in me from childhood. And I am grateful for the roadblocks that prevented me from meeting, the missteps that God's word prevented me from taking. A second thing that I'm grateful for in my own experience is that I learned the value of persistence and hard work. That part of me that refuses to give up, that it doesn't take roadblocks and just crumple in the face of them, that addresses challenges with resoluteness and a decision to move forward. That is part of what was built into me uh, from my parents and my family of origin. And I am grateful for that. That part of who I became from my family of origin has helped me overcome other challenges growing up in becoming a doctor, in going into ministry, in the business aspects of what I do now. That ability to persist in the face of challenges. I am grateful for that. So, whatever was good in your family of origin, look for that and choose to be grateful for it. By doing so, you are not denying the problems, the challenges, but you are looking for what is good there. Sometimes that will be easier, sometimes that will be harder. But that's number one, be grateful. Number two, give the gift of honor or respect. Uh, Honoring and respecting your parents does not mean following what they ask you to do if it is not healthy. It does not mean saying yes to every request or demand. I do believe that includes making sure that their basic needs are cared for, as Jesus and Paul in the New Testament verses that we mentioned earlier describe. Um, Even if your parents were toxic, difficult, abusive, or neglectful, you can carry yourself such that you do not seek to bring them harm. If they need to be held accountable in certain ways, yes, that does not dishonor them. When you tell stories about your family, you don't have to do so seeking to cause them more harm. Choosing the appropriate, thoughtful ways to tell your story or share about the traumatic aspects of your history, if they are there, you can do so in a way that still honors and respects them. And again, seeing that their basic needs are cared for. Again, sometimes that will be easier, sometimes that will be harder. But number two, uh, the gift of honor or respect, and it is a gift. It is not waiting for them to deserve your honor or respect, but choosing that as a gift because God asks you to. Number three, be an adult. I hear frequently, and I mentioned a couple earlier, I hear frequently from people who feel like their parents are still treating them as a child. Now, you can't change that necessarily. You cannot change who your parents are. But what you can do is choose to be an adult. That means doing your own work. It means refusing to be a victim. If you were victimized by your parents, or perhaps said in a better way, in whatever way you were, whether that was a very small aspect of your growing up or a large, overwhelming aspect, as an adult, you now have the choice about what you do with that history. If you carry trauma from difficult parents for many years growing up in a very difficult environment, it may take some significant, intentional, proactive work on your part. But you can do that. That is part of being an adult. For some that had extremely difficult childhoods, that is going to involve therapy. It may involve some trauma work. That is available today, thankfully. It may involve embracing that hurt child inside that didn't get what they needed. But as an adult, you get to choose to do those things. You get to choose to do the work to parent yourself if there are ways you did not get parented in a healthy way. You now get to do that so that you can grow to be the adult that God needs you to be. In that, learn to feed yourself. Think of the mental picture of you as an infant. You did not get to choose what you ate, when you ate, how much you ate. You were dependent on your parents or other caregivers to feed you. But as you grew into, toddlerhood and childhood, you learned to feed yourself. Now, initially, you didn't have a whole lot of control over that. That ability to feed yourself increased as you became older, but you were no longer dependent on your parents or other caregivers to put the food in your mouth, or eventually to choose what food you ate, or how much, or when. It's the same with emotional, mental, spiritual nourishment. If you are not getting the validation from your parents now that you need as an adult, you get to choose to go to other healthy places to get that. You can choose to no longer look to those who are unable to give you what you need, but instead to look to get those needs met in healthy, adult, godly places. You can look to other mentors, to healthy friends, and most importantly, to God Himself. So, number 3, be an adult. Number 4, set boundaries. With your parents, the majority of us need to learn to set healthy boundaries. If you have a parent now who seems to be demanding, manipulative, controlling, or is toxic in some way, you can choose to limit the kind of interactions you have with them. Just because your parent requires, demands, expects a certain level of interaction, you do not necessarily have to say yes. You do have the ability to limit the kinds of interactions you have with your parents. You can choose to limit the information you give your parents. If your parents happen to be unsafe to share certain things with, you don't have to share that with them. Now, God willing, as you become an adult, your ability to communicate and share things with your parents in an adult way will improve. Once you have become an adult inside, the ability of your parents to push your buttons is dramatically lessened. Even if they are intentionally trying to manipulate you, once you become an adult, it doesn't get you in the same way that it would have in the past. That comes with maturity, and it comes with learning to set boundaries. Part of this is learning to have the difficult conversations. If your parents are alive and they are interacting with you in difficult or destructive ways, you can learn to have the difficult conversations in a respectful, adult way. Not getting angry and demanding, but saying, Mom, Dad, when you do this, it is hurtful to me, and I'm asking you not to do that. They may or may not respond in a positive way, but you can have those difficult conversations. You can learn to respond to your parents in the way you would wish your children to respond to you if you were in similar circumstances. That really is the golden rule applied to dealing with difficult parents. Interact with your parents the way you would wish your adult children would respond to you in similar circumstances. I know personally many situations where in adulthood, even in late adulthood, God has brought much healing to parent-adult-child relationships. The song Imagine came out of such a story. That can happen. So keep interacting with your parents with a certain amount of grace, just as God gives you grace, even while you learn to set healthy boundaries if needed. And then number 5, make an intentional decision to choose where you get your identity from. One of the big roadblocks to dealing with difficult parents from an adult position, a roadblock to feeling like an adult when you deal with your parents, is that you are still looking to get something from them. A big part of that being identity. You can make the intentional choice to get your identity from God. He is the only one, big one, whose opinion of you truly matters. Coming to that realization is a challenge for many of us. And part of your journey with God is to truly come to the place where you can embrace His perspective of you. Now, that starts with loving you unconditionally. Remember, Jesus loves you just the way you are. There is nothing you have done or could do or will do that can possibly make Him love you any less, or frankly, that can make Him love you any more. You can't make Him love you more by doing better. He just plain loves you. And He also loves you enough to not be satisfied with the way you are, to invite you to move higher, to come up, to let Him change you in the places where you need to be changed. Learning to see yourself as God sees you to the degree that we as humans can is an incredibly growth-producing journey. And as you get your identity from Him, you will have a much easier time not getting your buttons pushed by your parents. Doesn't guarantee that your relationship with them will be easy or beautiful, but it will certainly improve. And you will have the internal resources to walk forward in being the person God needs you to be for you. Remember, God has a purpose for you. And whether that aligns with your parents' desire for you or not, it's God's view of you that matters. Hold on to that. It is His voice that you need to pay most attention to. Listen to Him saying to you, "You are my child, and in you I am well pleased." So there are my 5 encouragements, suggestions about what to do as you contemplate dealing with difficult parents. Number 1, choose to be grateful. Look for the things you can be grateful for about what you got from your parents. Number 2, give honor or respect as a gift, not waiting for them to earn it, seeing that their basic needs are cared for. Number 3, be an adult. That may involve some difficult work on your part. It means learning to feed yourself, refusing to any longer be a victim. Do your own work and be an adult. Number 4, set boundaries. Sometimes that will be more challenging than others. You may need to have some difficult conversations, but that is healthy. And number 5, choose where you get your identity from. Listen for God's voice to you and embrace that as telling you who you are. So I hope that is helpful if you are dealing with difficult parents. Thank you again for your questions. This podcast episode came directly from questions that you asked, and I welcome that. If you go to the podcast page on our website, drcarolministries.com, click on podcasts, you'll find a place there where you can send me a comment or a question. And I love hearing from you. It helps me know what you are being challenged with so that we can provide upcoming episodes that address that directly. Know that I pray for you regularly. One thing I want to mention is our Fully Alive group, fullyalivegroup.com. That is a place where we can dive into some of these challenging issues more deeply. Premium video interactions with me on a weekly basis, live question and answer sessions, special guests. Check that out, fullyalivegroup.com. I would love you to join us there. And now, until next week, may God bless you.
Thank you for listening to Relationship Prescriptions with Dr. Carol. Our purpose is to provide trustworthy resources that help you and others live fully alive in every way as God intended. If you would like to help others experience transformation in their lives and relationships, we invite you to partner with us. Text the word GIVE That's GIVE to the number 512-980-1620. Or visit our website at drcarolministries.com/donate to make a one-time contribution or monthly gift. Your financial support allows us to expand our message and to help others. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.